Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Historical Humans podcast. My name is Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by my fellow co hosts, Colum Coleman
Hello there.
and Aaron Gilpin. And today we are debating some of the strongest moral quandaries out there, and we're going to be discussing some life lessons, both taught and learned. And we're talking of no other than great English writer Charles Dickens.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. This is about the time of the year where we do something vaguely Christmas themed. And for this time, we have chosen the author of A Christmas Carol himself, Charles Dickens. Oh boy. Now, this man's life, well, not as flashy, not as, shall we say, high velocity as some of the other individuals that we have covered in our sort of biopic parts of this podcast, like last episode with Crazy Horse. His life is still very interesting nonetheless. It's a bit of a longer life and a bit more storied.
Yeah, we don't really talk about him outside of like the Christmas story. That's a or Christmas Carol or whatever. That's a
I mean, I remember reading
Charles
his.
Dickens writes a Christmas story. Oh no.
I very much remember reading A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations when I was in AP English, and it sucked, but you could tell that they were good works. But oh, it would have been much better if he had like a Simon Bolivar type life where he just united and freed a bunch of nations. No, he's just a depressed Victorian writer.
Yeah, he is an
that's every
English.
writer.
Yeah, he's an English novelist. He's Victorian era. He lived from 1812 to 1870, which means that he's actually a Victorian who was born before Queen Victoria.
Oh no, it's a
Oh,
pre-Victorian
an
Victorian.
He's
Edwardian.
pre-Victorian. However, I believe he comes of age around the same time as Queen Victoria gets on that throne, but he is born before her.
Do
Yeah.
you think they met?
Um, Quite
Probably.
possibly. One of the notes I found in some of the sources claimed that the Queen enjoyed his work. So, uh, yeah, it's quite possible she would have met him once upon a time. If the Queen of
So they
England.
met at Buckingham Palace in March of 1870. And
Oh,
that was after Queen Victoria had been trying to arrange a meeting with Dickens for 22 years. And
And
he
Dickens basically said, "I'm dying. Might as well do it."
and he was
22
working.
years.
They were talking about his latest work at the time, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, where Dickens promised to share the ending with Vic. And it was
And,
significant because he had not even told his closest friends.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, you begin to see just from these little blurbs that we're pulling here why he is considered the greatest writer of the Victorian age and has all sorts of accolades attached to him. This man is kind of the novelist for England.
He was even very well respected in America, which is both hilarious and sad in a lot of ways I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now, part of why he's considered the greatest of the Victorian era is because he was the most popular author, not only of his lifetime, but of any author before him. He
Wait, what?
had he had better circulation, more readers, more people after his work. He was the like beginning of that sort of all-star kind of author, the one that does book signings and tours and travels, and everyone sort of is, oh my God, it's Charles Dickens.
He was a
He's
true celebrity of his craft, and like
Yeah,
the tours he did, he even traveled internationally. He went to America to do book signings and tours to
yeah. Oh yeah, he travels the world doing this. He he's assisted. He's assisted a little bit by technology in the sense that Charles Dickens starts writing just a few decades after the invention of things like newspapers, literary magazines, journals, those little like weekly comic stories. All of those are invented at the end of the 18th century. And Charles Dickens starts writing basically at the age of 20. So it's like 1830. All of that has finally got the infrastructure under it to spread. And he's one of the first people in the door on that.
It's
So basically,
also
he's like the Captain Sparkles of like
oh,
Minecraft.
no.
We
Yeah.
do not need those comparisons.
It's accurate though if we're trying to reach the younger demographic. Aaron is our Gen Z intern.
Yes, thank you, youth translator.
um, it's interesting though because Dickens, having been right at that at golden age, also experienced a lot of mechanization, a lot of industrialization that also aided that. I mean, you saw the mechanization of a lot of printing presses where printing novels became a lot quicker, a lot easier. It coincided with a huge uptick in literacy rates and reading. I mean, for the longest time, the only people that could read were effectively just monks and nobility.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's spread throughout all of society, and honestly, all of society seems to like Charles Dickens and his works. There's a appeal to them, and while individual works will come and go into the spotlight of the public imagination, there was always something that Charles Dickens was doing or had done that stayed at the forefront of public interest and literary acclaim. And
You know what he is?
oh yeah, go for it.
He's like Stephen King minus the cocaine. Actually, no way. It's Victorian England.
Yeah,
There's definitely
there's
cocaine.
still yeah, make no
Oh,
mistake.
no.
Yeah, no, there we go. There we go. Yep.
That's a
Yeah.
good quote to start for the second
That's
episode
a
of the
good,
season.
great way to start Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody. It's not snowing outside.
So what we've deduced is the key to good writing is copious amounts of cocaine.
No, the key to good writing is having something resentful in your childhood, as we will find out here, with what kickstarts Charles's desire to literally do anything but work a job.
Let me guess. He lived impoverished, lived a poor lifestyle that he never wanted to go back to.
Oh my
No,
god, is he Dio Brando?
No, actually, he does not start off poor. That's the scary part. That's what makes this journey
Oh.
fun. He's not poor at the start. Because you see, Charles Dickens here, he's born in a place called Portsmouth, spends his early childhood in Chatham, which is where a lot of his novels end up going back to because that's like the one place he lived his entire life that he actually liked.
Of course, he's a Chatham lad.
Yeah. At 10, he moves to London. He will live there till 1860, at which point he returns to Chatham. Now, he's born into the middle class, so he's not poor. This is a brand new segment of society at the time. The Victorians did not know what to do with this. The middle class were these people that were rich enough to own property and feed themselves, but they did not hail from some ancient line of kings. And this was very confusing for British society because you're not an aristocrat, but you are a gentleman.
I don't know what that means. I'm American.
It means they got money.
We have
Basically,
But they ain't
no
you're
fancy,
not this,
fancy.
Yeah. Basically, you can afford a place to live, but you're not descended from Robert the Bruce.
Oh, peasants.
Looking at you, Justin. Oh god. But yeah. And so this is a weird little thing for society. He doesn't know what to do with them. And growing up, despite being a part of the middle class, the Dickens family falls into hard times. Dickens' father was a clerk in the Navy Pay Office. This is arguably the best job in England because you pay extremely well, have massive job security, all you need to do is know how to write and count. And you will be there forever. Because the whole point of this job was to balance the ledgers for the British Navy. The, single largest investment on Earth at the time.
And also, at this point, was the peak of the British Empire and Navy.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
don't want to mess that job up.
No, at this point, they have yet to start seeing mass territorial losses. I mean, fortunately, they did lose the United States, and I think they lost a few other ancillary colonies around that time, but.
USA. USA.
We
USA.
didn't start the fire.
Yeah.
No,
And,
make sure the sun sets on the entire British Empire.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the man holding the job, Dickens' father here, he doesn't understand what middle class means. He thinks he's an aristocrat. So he starts trying to live like one.
Oh
Hey,
no.
fake it till you make it. You gotta respect it.
And in 1824, Dickens' dad here is put in debtor's prison. And at the age of 12, Dickens is sent out into the world to work hard labor in order to support his mother.
You know, that's kind of fucked up.
Yep. He works for all of a year. Hates every minute of it. His dad gets out, goes back to work, pretty quickly. Like they're able to arrange things. They're able to throw some weight around. Helps having the British Navy to back you, I will say that much.
Yeah, but it's not like the British Navy themselves are backing him. It's more just like commanders and people he's friendly with having some nice conversations on his behalf.
And just the general idea of it's payroll, where the hell's my clerk?
Yeah, I can't imagine training someone quickly on that is easy.
No.
Especially when you find out he cooked the books along the way.
Yeah. And this experience is very big for Dickens because Charles here hates working, hates the way poor people have to live, and he becomes incredibly sympathetic to the shall we say, common folk in the ongoing class war that is Victorian England.
Oh.
And this is just going to crop up in all of his writing. He also gains an extreme resentment of his own mother.
Oh no.
Lazy wench, never went to work. Expected him to, sent him off to the mines.
Can't have anything nice, can you?
Well, no, because his mom, after his dad gets out, says, Charles, that education we were giving you where you learned how to count to 3, that costs too much money. And I kind of think that if I have your father's income and your income, I can live at an even better life than I was pretending to live at before. So you stay in the mines.
Oh no, she was a gold digger on top of it.
Yep.
But you're your own child.
Yep. Now,
Bold
fortunately
strategy,
for
Colum.
Charles, his father did have enough sense to say, no, education is the future. These clerk jobs pay way too good for our son not to get one. So he's sent back to finish his education, which, like all aspiring young men, ends at the ripe old age of 15.
I just also am sitting on the fact that he was going to be a Nepo baby if his dad was going to try and get him in the clerk's office as well.
Yep.
This is pre-Crimean War. The nepotism's rampant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's gonna be nepotism all over. He gets like 3 family jobs before becoming a writer.
Damn it. What are you going to tell me? That he actually does follow in his dad's footsteps?
No, actually, he never ends up in the Navy office. Instead, he goes and works for a solicitor.
Oh,
What the
okay.
Where he gains an innate understanding of what it means to be Bob Cratchit under Ebenezer Scrooge.
Which...
Oh, yeah, no, can you jump in?
I feel like this is a point that I should translate for our American office, for our American listeners, because solicitor's office is another fancy word to say lawyer.
Justin, check the recording real quick.
Oh, shoot.
Can we? Yep.
So, before we got interrupted because of technical difficulties, one of the things that I was mentioning is for our American listeners, solicitor's office in the UK is basically just a lawyer. It's a lawyer's office. He was a law clerk.
Yep.
Yeah, because solicitation in the United States, I feel like means something completely different.
Technically, it means salesman, and that's a very old term for salesman. Now it means something much, much worse.
Usually, you're soliciting illicit services.
Yeah, it's a salesman thing. Anyway, he then moves up further into the world of law, where he becomes the shorthand reporter at the law courts. This is basically the equivalent of the stenographer
That's
in
the word.
in modern courts. His job is to just try and write down what is said as close to verbatim as possible as it is being said.
I mean, to be fair,
Such a hard.
that's got to be a good practice, though, to learn how to write quickly and how to try and be quick and accurate while writing.
I couldn't do it.
Oh yeah, no.
I'm sure there was a lot of shorthand that they did like
Oh, yeah.
stenographers do nowadays.
Yeah, and Dickens benefits from this massively because a lot of his stories feature some sort of subplot involving the law, either trying to avoid it, thinking you've done something illegal when you haven't, etc., etc. And he gains that knowledge here. So he's actually pretty accurate in terms of Victorian laws with his characters and his plot points. So all the like worries and great expectations that you might be doing something illegal that turn out not to be, or turn out to actually have been illegal, that is actually from his time in the law offices.
I mean, I
That's so
respect
cool.
it because the accuracy, I'm sure, allows a lot more people to connect to it as well.
Yeah, it helped with his realism in the day, and kept that universal love going for it in his lifetime, because it felt like these people were actually contemplating things and actually trying to figure out, what does the law say? Am I going to jail for this?
It also, as bad as it is, effectively gives a lot of the narratives and stories a moral compass as well. I know a lot of them do have moral lessons included in them, so having the law as some overarching guider makes sense.
Yep. He then becomes a parliamentary and newspaper reporter, which seems to have been the family business, as a number of the cousins were also in it.
And parliamentary and newspaper reporter, it means he was on the ground, fast, quick, around the politicians, around the happenings of the nation.
I imagine all the newsboys are just like doing it like a relay, going back and forth with news.
Yep. Yeah. He leaves after only 3 years, but this is where he discovers that he loves journalism, that he loves the concept of writing. This is what turns his eye towards telling stories, towards literary journals, towards all these newspapers and magazines that are popping up and expanding and becoming commonplace practices for everybody. It's also where he gains his absolute contempt for the British government.
That comes along with time for everyone.
What a lad.
This man despised Parliament.
What a mad lad.
Yeah.
Okay, we
He
cut
met
out.
with. Yeah. So he was bought off the Queen for 22 years. That's why. Hates the government.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's very much not happy with his government. He becomes a political reformist here, and that's a very bold thing to do in Victorian England, when the state writes the law and the state mandates loyalty. Yeah.
Wouldn't have these issues if
real
the
mad
state
lad.
wasn't so fucked.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. He actually goes to work for what's known as a Bethamite journal, which is a very liberal journal. It's called the Morning Chronicle. He works there from 34 to 36. And what this is there's a philosophy proposed by Jeremy Bentham that was this idea of utilitarianism.
Oh, right.
the belief that the good of the majority is the good of society. And at this point in time, the British government is represented almost exclusively by the top, shall we say, 5%.
House of Lords, right?
Yeah, it's House of Lords and the Royal House and the House of Commons exists, but is still fairly useless. So this is a very radical idea that maybe what's best for everyone should be left up to everyone. And so he gets this political footing here. And right before he joins this journal, he begins his literary career. 1933 is when he first starts sending.
1833.
Yeah, 1833, whatever.
I don't think he started
Dealing
writing
with
in the
this
height of the
Victorian
Depression.
era stuff. It is too far in the past, but also too close to modern times for me to get anything right.
You know, he was pen pals with FDR, and they were talking about how to completely revamp the systems. And
Yeah, it was very much against Churchill.
Karl Marx would have been here.
Oh no,
I'll fight y'all later.
Marxist dicks.
That's where he got it, like some more inspiration.
Yeah. But yeah, he starts writing essays and short stories and everything to magazines and journals. And he gets his big break in 1836, which consequently is the same year he quits working for the Morning Chronicle. See, Charles Dickens gets all of his previous 3 years worth of work published as something called Sketches by Boz. And Boz was Dickens' pen name because nobody is going to sully the name of Dickens by having it associated with something like writing.
Crazy.
What?
Yep. To avoid stigma, should he not be successful, he hid his name behind a pseudonym. That's right. The first works by Charles Dickens were not officially written by Charles Dickens. They were not published under his name.
I mean, even very popular modern authors also do it. Like Stephen King has Richard Bachman.
Yep. Yeah, no, there's a bunch of them that do it, but it's kind of fun right here. Where it's in the Victorian era, so it's less to hide yourself from success and more to hide yourself should you fail.
I mean, I respect it. I would probably do something similar if I could.
Yeah, sure, I would.
Yeah, but
It's
anyway,
also easier for ghostwriting.
yeah,
James Patterson does it all the time.
yeah.
When was the last time James Patterson wrote his own novel?
Isn't he actually just dead?
I honestly have no clue.
I don't know. I honestly am at a complete loss there. Send us a comment about James Patterson if you so choose. Anyway, Sketches by Boz comes out in February of 1836. And oh dear God, do the job offers start rolling in after that. He gets invited to write descriptions for a bunch of very popular and somewhat famous artistic engravings that are going to be reprinted as a sort of comic serial. So he starts effectively writing the little lines under comics and all the descriptions for pictures and books. This is a very important job that you had to be liked by someone in order to get. He also publishes his first official full novel, which is the Pickwick Papers. And he publishes them in installments from 1836 to 1837. That's right, he actually gets a job publishing a chapter of a novel every month. This is how you what's the word? This is how you produced works of literature back in that time, because a literary journal could only fit so many pages in it per week or per month, and they had to support multiple authors. So you got paid a little bit every month, every time you sent in one chapter, and you were expected to send in chapters until you either died or finished the book.
That's right, because Stephen King actually published a lot of his early work in magazines too. So
Yep.
some of like the first editions of books like I want to say like Cujo,
Yeah.
Greta, are like in actual
Yeah.
magazines.
The pulp fictions of the United States in the 1960s and 70s are a good example of this type of writing, where you would just write in either a short story or part of a whole story every month, and you would get paid a little bit every month. And you, as a starting writer, got to survive. The journal got a lot of decent work and a lot of higher quality work than it would otherwise have if it demanded that you publish the thing in full. And, everyone kind of benefits. He was back with Dickens here. He also transitions into becoming a editor of a monthly magazine called Bentley's Miscellany. And this is where he starts really taking over the industry. He does some vertical integration.
Oh,
He starts publishing his own works in the magazine he edits. No bias involved whatsoever there, guys.
I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, this is how we get Oliver Twist.
Wow.
Yep. He writes Oliver Twist for Bentley's Monthly, the magazine he edits. It takes him 2 years of monthly publications to do it, but he gets it done. Yep. He also marries Catherine Hogarth, daughter of a Scottish journalist named George, and he proceeds to immediately start having 9 children with her. This poor woman. Because not only does she have 9 kids with him, but he's not even going to be all that faithful to her.
Kids.
Yeah. But that comes along a little bit later. And what he finds out is that novel serialization is extremely profitable in Victorian London. And he goes absolutely ham with it. He just starts writing anything and everything. And London very quickly figures out that the way Dickens writes his books, the way he frames his scenes, makes them very, very easy to adapt into stage plays.
Oh, so that's why the Christmas has so many versions.
Yep, because it's incredibly easy to adapt into a theater play or a movie. It's very versatile. And in Victorian London, as many as 20 theaters at once would be performing some version of a Charles Dickens work.
I mean, one plus side to that is for Dickens, it's basically free promotion because his shows are getting out there. But then also, it's an adaptability. You're able to consume the content in different ways.
Yeah. It allows
Who
him
doesn't
to,
love the Muppets version of the Christmas Carol?
yep, yep. And like the Muppets, it allows him to spread to demographics that he normally wouldn't reach, like the large illiterate population among London's underclass, whose only form of real news is town criers and whose only form of entertainment is the stage.
Yeah, true.
So suddenly, even the poorest of the poor can recite lines from Charles Dickens the same way they could recite lines from William Shakespeare. Hmm. And honestly, he starts really innovating too. Like Shakespeare, he decides that he's going to invent, or at least reinvent, a number of literary conventions.
Oh no.
The most famous of which is The Lost Child. This is someone who is usually a little boy in Dickens' books. They're a child, and they are generally oppressed by society, held back by society, lost in society. Society doesn't care about them. they tend to get overlooked in the shuffle. This begins in Oliver Twist. It's the main character. It's the whole theme in Great Expectations, and it's Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol. His
Oh
Tiny
yeah.
lost
Tim.
child. Tiny Tim will not see his next Christmas unless Ebenezer Scrooge changes his ways. Tiny Tim is lost in society. Society itself does not care enough about this child to save him, no matter
Because
how loved he is by his father.
Do you think that's a projection of Dickens' childhood?
A little bit. Definitely a lot of it is a projection of his hatred of child labor and the concept of how the working class is made to live.
Do you think that's because he was made to work as a child?
Yep. That's where he gained his sympathy. Yes, he was made to work as his child. He hated his mother for it, and he basically invents this literary trope because of it. It all comes back. It all comes back. And it actually proves to be a very nice vehicle for a lot of his moralizing and social messages, because the fact that this is a child generates a lot of sympathy. And, whatever is hurting a child tends to generate a lot of animosity.
yeah,
So,
it does that.
if he goes around saying greed and money, money grubbing and all this stuff that all the London businessmen do is literally killing children, you can be damn sure that when Christmas Carol came out, people were mad at the banks.
I think I know, or I have an idea.
Yeah. And speaking of Christmas Carol, the next thing he invents is in 1843 when he writes A Christmas Carol. He invents the concept of writing a Christmas book. Before Charles Dickens, people did not write stories about Christmas. You did not write The Grinch or Frosty the Snowman or any of that stuff. You did not have Hallmark movies.
Are
This
you
man
telling me
caused
Charles?
all that.
Are you telling me Charles is Charles also the reason why we keep having Christmas like decorations out 1 month each
So
year?
Dickens is the reason we have the Hallmark Channel.
Yes, he's the reason we have the Hallmark Channel. He's also the reason we have Home Alone and Elf and all the other movies that are actually fun to watch.
More importantly, he's got the Christmas tree salesman trope that has spawned from his. Like, if he saw what this had transformed into, like he was a Christmas tree farmer and she was a big town gal who got stranded, but she had a big meeting she had to be at the next day.
Yeah.
Name which movie I'm talking about. It's all
Yeah.
of
No, you're talking about all of them. You're talking about all of them. They're all the same movie.
I swear
But
I've lived that moment. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it was a Dickensian Christmas movie. Like the tree lighting, the parade,
yeah.
the kids
Oh dear
crying.
God.
But yeah, A Christmas Carol is his most popular book to date when he publishes it. It ties him forever with Christmas. Dickens becomes like almost a word for Christmas because of how successful this book is for him. And the Christmas Carol itself gets hailed as what was the exact wording on it? The great Christmas myth of modern literature. That's its official title.
God damn.
Yeah. And honestly, there actually spawns a like pseudo philosophy out of this book and Charles Dickens' subsequent association with it. Because Dickens' personal philosophy becomes nicknamed the Christmas philosophy. Because remember, Dickens is a utilitarian. And so his personal philosophy, which he calls the Carol philosophy, is basically take that Christmas spirit of being nice to each other and helping each other out and apply it the entire year round. the poor don't suddenly stop starving in January.
Yeah.
They really don't. If they did, they would be so much happier.
Jeez, it's almost as if the issues of the past are often the same as the issues of today.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dickens will work to maintain this connection to Christmas that he has and to this sort of love, peace, and charity idea. He will write a different Christmas story every year from 1843 when he writes A Christmas Carol until 1867 when he stops really publishing works.
Wow,
With
so he
only,
really made that his identity. He's like, I
yeah,
found the thing that works. I'm gonna keep going.
yeah. The only year he doesn't is 1847. And we're not really sure why it is. It's just he happened to miss that year. What else is there? Yeah. He switches journals to household words in 1850, and he will work for it until 59, where it becomes all year round.
Oh, it was only seasonal before?
Well,
We don't know. We don't know. We don't know who's naming these things. I don't know who names the Victorian journals, but they all need to either be given a major raise or fired.
All
Because
year round.
we go from like penny dreadful to all year round, and I'm like, who is naming these?
Well, sir, how do
because
we
you can
show our
get a
reliability?
copy
Yeah, how do we show our
around.
reliability? How do we show our frequency? How often would they want to buy a paper from us? Well, my boy, they should be buying them all year round.
Yep.
Actually.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Although I will say, penny dreadful has to be the equivalent of like Subway for radicalizing people. You know, a penny dreadful costs 50 pence. A $5 footlong costs $12.
You know, they only actually ran that marketing campaign for like 8 months.
Yep.
I know. I remember.
Pepperidge Farm remembers. Anyways, Dickens was very,
I
very
remember. I
successful with
remember.
this goofy Piper name.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weekly journal that publishes just about anything. And under Dickens, it achieves a previously unheard of circulation of 300,000 copies a week.
I mean, that is huge. That's a
That is,
lot.
yeah, that is about, I think, maybe 30% of the population of London at the time. So, just under 1 in 3 Londoners is buying his paper every week.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah.
And of those is somehow Queen Victoria.
Yep. Yeah. And keep in mind, people can share this stuff. Like a Netflix account, it can be shared among people you know.
Yeah.
So, there are more people reading it than just the 300,000 that are buying the copy.
Did you get the family members also reading it?
Yep.
See, I like to think it just diffused itself into the countryside, started in the city, and then got passed out to their cousins and aunts and uncles in the pastures.
Yep.
You
And
have the daily all
and
around. You know it.
yep. Yeah. And as the sort of editor of Household Words and All Year Round, he publishes a few of his iconic works: Hard Times, Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations. But he also gives platform to a number of other very important and distinguished writers of the Victorian era. He basically gives a platform to a lot of the other all-star cast of his time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And some of these names are Elizabeth Gaskell, Wilkie Collins, Charles Reed, Edward Bowler Lytton. I want to call him Butler every time I see him. These are a lot of authors. You probably haven't heard of them, but honestly, at least one of them would have had to work on your high school curriculum. That's how big these authors are.
I had to read 3 of his works in high school, and I'm still traumatized from it.
Just Dickens.
God, no, Steinbeck. There were quite a lot.
Steinbeck, yeah.
Oh yeah, Steinbeck.
We
Yeah,
didn't read. We read Grapes of Wrath though. We didn't read Three Blind Mice.
We did both. I subjected
Or
myself to
no,
a
Of Mice and Men. Sorry.
yeah.
I feel like Three Blind Mice would be far less traumatic than Of Mice and Men.
What was the mouse book? Algernon?
Flowers for Outer.
Flowers for
I
Algernon.
remember
That
that
was another
one.
one. Yeah. I've had to read so many books. I had one teacher tell me that he thinks I should be an AP, and it just ruined the last 3 years of my experience.
Yeah, a teacher did that to me once. Instead of AP, though, it was honors. I was like, "Why did you do that?" He's like, "I know you could do more." I'm like, "Please."
Ah, yes. But moving on from the traumas of English lit classes, we come to a very, something much lighter, the Crimean War.
Oh, beautiful.
Because, you
Right.
know, people apparently fight over Crimea.
Can't imagine why.
I,
It's not like it's a
oh,
strategic location or right on a major body of water that has a
Yeah.
small isthmus that connects it to another major body of water.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Russians don't ever want to be involved in any sort of war there.
Whoo!
Now Charles Dickens was very political leading up to the war. The Crimean War lasted from 1853 to 1856, and Dickens absolutely hated it. He particularly disliked the concept that all this war strife going on and all this war fundraising was detracting from, shall we say, what would become health and human services. All these social programs for the poor were getting cut and neglected because all that money was being sucked out for the military. And Dickens hated that.
To be fair,
Understandable.
to Dickens as well, is a lot of times in war or when countries go to war, social issues tend to take the forefront, which is very interesting.
Yeah,
And like you see a lot of change happen during these times of conflict because it fosters that environment, so to speak.
yeah. And Dickens was very
Especially because
upset.
of that, it makes everything more vulnerable.
Yeah, and Dickens was very upset because not only was, his social causes being neglected, the things he spends his life fighting for, but also Crimea is a freaking continent away from England. What are we doing over there fighting some foreign war? Because he was a bit of an isolationist with this because the Crimean War is what, Johnny Turk and the Russians. Why should England
French,
be
English,
be
Russian,
involved in
British.
this? That's the big question he's asking, and his answer is England shouldn't.
I don't even know why they got involved, other than if it was an alliance poll.
It was a balance of power thing. The idea being that if this changes hands to the wrong person, they'll have more control in the region, and basically domino effect Cold War logic.
Uh,
If our people lose so much as an inch, or at the very least people we hate less lose an inch, then the entire world will fall. That is
yeah, I
the
forgot about that.
mentality. Dickens calls it bullshit.
I
He's
don't
not
blame
wrong.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where Dickens writes his darkest novels. They're very harsh satire. They're all tragedies. They're very despondent, and you can see it in his names. 1853's Bleak House, 1854 Hard Times, Little Dorrit, 1855 to 57.
I hate to be the one to say this, but those are things that I feel like I would have named writings and ramblings I had as an angsty teenager.
Yes, yes. These would be the titles on the inside cover of Justin's teenage diaries.
Or on my
Dear
MySpace
diary.
page. Hard
Oh God,
times.
God, that's right. We
Oh
are that old.
God.
This bleak house. I hate my hometown. I hate living here.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the politicism dies off after the Crimean War ends. He kind of becomes less political, and also just less frequent of a writer. And part of that is marital trouble. In 1858, Dickens and his wife separate. They start living in separate houses. Now, keep in mind, they've not been married too long. You know, I think about 20 years.
That's a pretty long time.
And, yeah, they've had 9 children in those 20 years. So,
I was gonna say this is
yeah,
around the time that most women live to the ripe old age of died in childbirth.
yeah. And and one of the fun things about this separation is no one finds out it happens until the 1930s.
The
I
30s?
mean, to be honest, I think that's probably how it should be. Of like,
Yeah,
I don't think marital issues really need to be
yeah.
people's issue.
Because there's an
Yeah,
interview
probably.
with like some of like Dickens' children and grandchildren where they mention the parents living apart. And that's the first anyone had heard of it.
Well, and
It was
also
in like
public
some radio
divorce.
interview in 1930.
Yeah,
A
divorce
divorce at that
also
time.
wasn't. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
there wasn't.
possible, but it's really hard to do.
this
Oh, no,
this
no, no.
next part is what hurts the most.
Yeah. There wasn't a divorce. Divorce doesn't exist. What there was instead was an affair. Charles Dickens, at the youthful, tender, childlike age of 46, decides that he is going to sleep with a actress, a beautiful young woman named Ellen Ternan, who is 18 years old.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. I think even though, even in the modern sense, that is more acceptable, that's just,
It's
yeah, it's.
acceptable on a technicality. Dickens Dickens was days away from being on To Catch a Predator.
But then, this is no way justification or anything of the sort. But in this era, it wasn't uncommon for young girls to be wed when they became women.
Yeah, well, yeah, keep in mind, like
But that is
with some of
still really gross.
Dickens received higher education. His
Yeah.
education ended at the age of 15. He was working in labor factories at 12. You were expected to basically be an adult in miniature by 10 at this time. So there is very different social expectations. It does not make the 27-year age gap any less uncomfortable.
Yeah. Oh.
This is this is really messed up when you look at it from especially from our time.
And I
mm,
just always try to I put myself in that frame of thought and it fucks me up even more because I am currently 28 years old. So to imagine if I were in the shoes of Dickens, that that's disgusting.
Yeah.
not a
I
vibe.
just think it's probably a good idea for to say I don't think anyone here is on board with that large of an age
No,
gap, unless you're like 60 and your partner's like 87. uh,
not this. Not one. Yeah. Yeah, no, no. This is an old man trying to feel young, and he is looking for it in all the wrong places.
well, he's feeling something young.
Yep. The third change that comes about in 1858, and the reason why he kind of stops writing novels, is because he becomes a paid public reader. This was an actual job you could get. You would perform readings of your work in public, and he had done this since 1853 for charitable fundraising, where people would pay money to hear Charles Dickens sit down and read them Oliver Twist.
Well, that's kind of cool, though.
That's
Yeah,
cute.
it's very cool. People would be paid to read other people's novels, and here was the author himself reading it to you, so he could charge a very high premium, and he discovered that he did. he originally takes to doing these readings as a sort of break from his marital discomforts. He has a long-standing love of performance and captivating a crowd. He almost ran away to become an actor in 1832.
Now that would have been something.
Yep. Yeah, it would. He might have ended up being the next Irving.
I would think he would be the next Booth, really.
Justin, no,
He was
it's
also an
too soon.
actor.
It's too soon, and they're in the same time frame. So no, no,
Oh.
If anything, you should give me more respect for that. Come on.
no. And one of the things he finds is that reading is more profitable than writing. It's easier to get a repeat performance, and people will pay more upfront in that single day to hear him read a book he's already written than to buy one chapter of the next book he's writing.
Not to mention, once he's already achieved some massive level of fame, so people, it's kind of that successful musician trope where people don't want to hear the new stuff, they want to hear you say the classics. They want to hear Dickens himself reread the A Christmas Carol.
Yep. Yeah. Everyone only wants to hear Margaritaville. They do not care about the other songs.
Because they all want to experience it live.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. So he captivated on that, and good for him. I mean, I would say monetize where you can.
This is a pretty good time for him to be doing this too, because as of 1860, he is effectively dying.
Yikes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Monster. He starts dying in 1860. His last three books, he writes them and publishes them while he is terminally ill. And those three books are A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, and Our Mutual Friend, which is the last fully published book that he writes, and it comes out in 1865.
So
Oh, wow.
arguably some of his greatest works came at the last decade.
Yep. Yep. Also, the same year as he publishes Our Mutual Friend, he acquires some severe PTSD.
Oh.
As he is diagnosed with anxiety following a train wreck that he is in.
God
I don't blame him. A
damn.
train wreck is terrifying. I don't.
Yeah, he is on the train while it suffers a railway accident, which means you are in a, several 100,000-ton vehicle as it goes flying into someplace it shouldn't. It's bad. Yeah.
I'm just imagining him on a railway.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. He goes on a farewell tour of America that he is forced to abandon in April of 1869 because this causes him to have a bit of a panic attack and collapse.
Yikes.
Should have done the Irish goodbye.
Yep. And he dies in 1870 with his final work, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, unfinished. This is the work that he meets Queen Victoria to discuss. And as far as we know, Queen Victoria is the only human being he told the ending to.
So she should have helped him finish it like they did with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, no. What she should have done, and what she probably did do, was sit there and go, "This is what you get for standing against my government. No one shall ever hear the final chapter.
If I had
Ice
a
and Fire
TARDIS,
shall never be published."
that should be a Doctor Who episode, if anything. Go back to Buckingham Palace with Queen Vic and Charles Dickens just having an argument, and we're looking for the final chapter of Edwin Drood.
Oh no, they've already met the Doctor. Remember season?
They've both already met the
episode 3 of the
Doctor.
reboot.
But I'm talking together. They need to go to that.
Yeah, but hey, you can do you could do all sorts of things with that. Maybe Edwin Drood is a real person, and they have to solve the mystery before Dickens dies.
Oh.
You could do all sorts of things with that.
Hire us now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Russell
Please,
T.
BBC,
Davies
we're
is
desperate.
is like furiously writing this information down.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, during his final years, the critics are able to sense weakness because there's a decade-long period where this man is actively dying, and they pounce on him. But they don't go after his work. No, no, no. Everything he continues to write and produce is still regarded as impeccable. I mean, for crying out loud, he's produced Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations 2 years apart.
Yeah.
You know, this man has not lost his ability. Instead, he gets attacked largely by the Americans for not
USA?
being for not being American enough.
Oh no! Oh no!
I
I
mean,
don't
we
like this.
had
Where
the
this is
likes
going.
of Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson that were all his contemporaries.
Yep. Yep. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is one of the most vocal people to go after Charles Dickens. And his feud with Dickens mostly stems from the fact that Dickens idealized America and was very vocal about his disappointments every time he came to visit it. You know,
Understandable, but
something,
Yeah.
slaveholding, something, you people do what?
Yeah, he
Uh,
realized very quickly that America was full of Americans, and that
Yeah.
was the disappointing factor.
Yeah. He liked the idea of the land of liberty. He did not like it in practice at the time. And
yeah, the Liberty was in progress.
yep. And honestly, Longfellow has one of the best insults, like the best Victorian insults to ever hurl at another human being, which he actually makes a very popular insult against Dickens for using it. He calls him a rather sad fellow. And after that, everyone just refers to him as a very sad man.
That's fucked up. That's like saying, "Oh, you're just such a sad little guy," and people just pick it up and run with it.
Yep. Yep.
Ooh.
And what they're effectively attacking here is his decreased social energy. The man is in his 50s in the Victorian era. He is terminally ill. He is severely traumatized. And people are like, he's just not that fun at parties. Where's that youthful vigor he had when he was 30?
Oh my God, he got old.
Yep. They also attack his friend group because everyone that Dickens started out with, almost all the other authors that he knew from his early days that he considered his contemporaries that were his literary equals, they are dead. And he has filled that void with younger talents, newer talents, people with less acclaim. And he's seen as diluting his social circle by allowing these young people in it.
What the
But on
fuck?
the flip side, he's probably mentoring them, giving them good advice, and being a
Yeah.
sage of wisdom.
Yeah, let's
Fuck
be
the
honest.
Victorians.
It's 50 years from Dickens to C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien here. So, we got to get someone for the filler generation.
I mean,
And
that was what. Not Enlightenment was a lot earlier, wasn't it?
yeah, Enlightenment was earlier. Enlightenment was Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was
But
a
yeah,
different age of literature that really popularized and populated in the 1880s and 1890s.
yeah,
I just
yeah,
can't think of the name for it at
yeah.
the current point.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about the Gilded Age writings.
Gilded Age, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, those. Yeah, so he's kind of got to get that going.
And was a pretty monumental figure in that.
Yep. And my personal favorite attack is they go after his children. Because of his 9 children, he had several sons. None of those sons were seen as remarkable. Charles Dickens was a great man, son of a nobody. And it is expected that somehow his children match or outdo their father. Dickens is the only great literary mind of his family. And so he gets attacked for having children that are not successful in the same way he is. because keep in mind, you can't attack his works.
You gotta go for the ad hominem attacks. You
Yeah.
gotta go with, you know what? Your kids aren't all that special. They're
Yeah.
not as bright.
You're a sad man. Your friends are young and stupid, and your son is a dullard.
What does son end up doing?
I don't know. They were just ordinary people. Like his children did not go on to be famous, and that was the whole point of the attack. Because this is still
British high
Victorian
society.
things.
Yeah.
Yes, it's still like Victorian society. If you are a member of the House of Lords, it is expected that your children will be members of the House of Lords. So Charles Dickens is the great writer of the Victorian era. Why are not his sons all great writers of the Victorian era? What's wrong with this man?
It's kind of interesting because they did attempt to. So I looked it up, and you say that none of his kids achieved any sort of fame or recognition. I'm going to list off some of these professions, and you let me know what you think.
Well, that was the attack.
I'm aware it was the criticism. His daughter, Mary Dickens, was an author. Dora Annie Dickens was a novelist.
Daughters don't count in this. They specifically go after the sons. The daughters actually know what they're doing.
So the men, you have Edward Dickens was a politician. Francis Dickens was a police officer. Henry Fielding Dickens was a barrister. Henry Fielding Dickens was a judge.
So they're all the villains from his books are his own children.
Oh,
a politician, a judge, a barrister, and a cop.
Well, and then there was Charles Dickens Jr., who was a writer and a magazine editor, but not to the same critical acclaim as his father.
They're the villains of the story.
And Walter Landor Dickens was a soldier.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of Dickens boys.
Yeah, there were quite a few boys. Yeah.
But yeah, all those professions in the modern day, you'd be like, okay, yeah, they're pretty successful. They're doing all right for themselves, and the critics are like, they're not as good of an author as he was. Are you good, Aaron?
In fact, 5 of them aren't even trying to write.
Oh, we lost Aaron. That blew his mind.
No, we're losing people. We'll try and work through this further technical difficulties. We apologize for this being something of a scuffed episode. It is a Christmas miracle after all. But Charles Dickens does give one final farewell tour in London in 1870. Hey, we got Aaron again.
Hey.
No, yeah, sorry. I was just messaging you about my internet.
You just look so surprised, Aaron.
We found you. We found you, Aaron. Don't worry.
Thought that
in
Pinkerton's got you
1870,
again.
Aaron. Not the Pinkerton joke.
Hey, talk about timing.
That joke. We need a new running tagline.
Okay, but Colum, you got to admit, look at the year. It's 1870. The Pinkerton Agency was established in what, 1865?
No, they're established earlier.
They're contemporaries.
Because they escort Lincoln to his first inauguration, so they're earlier.
They prevented an assassination attempt on Lincoln in 1861 too.
So a little bit earlier, but 1870s they could be around.
They are still around today too.
Yeah, they are. 1850 is their founding date.
I wonder what they're doing these days protecting CEOs.
Aaron,
they got in the news for raiding people's homes over IP.
Oh yeah, Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
true, but also,
but also, Anywho, Dickens on his final farewell tour in London in 1870 gives a very speech. It's just one sentence. It's his final statement to the public before he's like, I'm going to retire forever. This is the last any of you will ever see of me. And he says, from these garish lights, I vanish now forevermore. When he dies later that year, they print it out on little business cards and hand them out to all the people as like party favors for showing up to his funeral. Because this is Victorian London. These people are obsessed with death and dying. So, yes, you get classy party favors for going to someone's funeral.
That
You
is
get a
actually kind of cool.
souvenir. Well, we read the book Death in the Dining Room.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
like wakes, fuck, they used to be great. Why are we doing visitations? They're boring and sad. Let's get fucking drunk.
Yeah. The two most obsessed with death cultures in human history have been the ancient Egyptians and the Victorian English.
Especially because one liked to eat the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can thank Queen Victoria for never getting over the death of her husband. Grief counseling, not a thing.
She really liked Alfred.
Yeah. Yeah. Hence,
There's a reason why she had a lot of kids.
yeah. Hence, hence party favors at Dickens' funeral.
You think she got one? She
She
absolutely was
probably
at that
did.
funeral. She absolutely was there.
I have no idea if she attended. I have no doubt she would have gotten one.
You know, my favorite thing, especially about the Victorians being so obsessed with death and also eating things from corpses, they really were addicted to the embalming fluid that they used.
They're Victorians. They're addicted to everything. There is no such thing as substance control.
It's
So
all substance abuse with the Victorians. It's really great, guys.
So you brought up a good point here, and something that's interesting is Queen Victoria did not actually attend Dickens' funeral,
Boo, what a bitch.
but she did send a message of condolence to Catherine, expressing her deepest regret. And one of the things I don't think you quite highlighted well is how small his funeral was. They didn't even tell people until after it had happened.
What?
Only 14 people went to this funeral.
Oh, was
And
it just like a friends and family kind of thing?
yeah. And keep in mind, Charles Dickens is the sort of figure where if you've ever seen Les Miserables, you know the
You're missing
funeral
a
of the
lot,
one
man.
general, there would be parades and riots in the streets of, oh God, Dickens is dead. In fact, when the news breaks, the newspapers publish the phrase Charles Dickens is dead. Is Father Christmas next? Because remember, Dickens is that associated with Christmas that they think the Christmas spirit and Saint Nick are going to die because Charles
I,
Dickens has proven mortal.
That also
oh
just
my,
sounds like a threat. Like, is Father Christmas
to
next?
be fair,
To
we
be
all
fair,
did feel the same way when Betty White died.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna feel that way when what is it? Mariah Carey. All I want for Christmas.
Charles Dickens gets his Mrs. Claus all those years later.
No, you're missing out the best one where it's a threat and it's a Dirty Harry movie.
No,
Yeah.
no, my favorite thing though is just, or at least like the only other thing I could also compare it to is like, do you guys ever see like the news coverage of people going to like see Michael Jackson's like procession or funeral and whatnot?
No, I've not looked at
I
that.
mean, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There were lines.
Whenever there's a celebrity of certain acclaim, there's usually a large crowd that will pay their respects.
Yeah.
They
Oh
were
my
doing
God.
that with Liam Payne at the hotel.
We
Like,
should we should actually do probably like coverage of like people's famous graves.
Yep. Yeah. Speaking of famous graves,
Or
he
like
gets
funerals.
buried in Westminster Abbey.
You're fucking kidding me.
no, they
They
have an area where they have very prominent artistic or literary figures buried.
Yeah. This man is
Who
Christmas incarnate to the Victorians, a highly religious Christian culture.
guys, what if, and hear me out, Saint Nicholas dead, right? Reincarnated. Charles Dickens Minus the minor cheating, but like, not great. Reincarnated again. Who this time? Mariah Carey.
All I want for Christmas.
I don't know. I feel like Mariah Carey has earned the hatred of retail workers everywhere.
You say that, but when the day does inevitably come that she passes, that song will be played on repeat no matter what time of year it is.
Yeah,
I'm just
we all
saying.
we all know. Uh,
That is my theory right now.
But yeah, a lot of prominent figures give honor of getting buried in Westminster Abbey. There's quite a few really prominent figures that are buried there. I highly recommend looking up that list.
I
yeah, no, it's
sometimes just can't believe Charles Dickens was such a comrade,
yeah.
a
We
cheating comrade,
yeah.
like a whore,
Keep in mind they
but
don't
comrade.
figure that out for another 60 years. Nobody figures that out for 60
I
more
mean,
years.
if they were consensually separated, I don't look as negatively on the affair. It's the 18-year-old
It's
and the 27-year-old age gap that I can't get past.
yeah. It's technically adultery
Hmm.
and it's a little concerning in the choice of partner. But that's where we'll leave that bit because just because Charles Dickens is dead doesn't mean you can stop reading his works.
Yeah,
No.
I should actually probably. I've never actually read these cities. I've never actually read A Christmas Carol. I'm going to though, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
Unless I can't alter.
I think A Christmas Carol is probably one of his better ones because of all the ones I've read, it's the one that keeps its levity the most. Like it's the most, I guess, Oliver Twist like of the ones I've read, where it's things are satirical and they are fun. There's an entire speech about why is it called Dead as a Doornail? Like you could put that right into Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and gaslight people.
But, like many a good artist, Dickens really kept a lot of his popularity in death, but it wasn't until long after his death that really he got more serious attention. A lot of really prominent authors started looking back at his works, and it led to a renaissance of his works. I mean, he drew the attention of the likes of George Orwell, Humphrey House, Edmund Wilson, some of the most prominent writers of the early 20th century.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's there's this sort of mini renaissance he has in the 1950s when as the world is winding down from World War II, people sort of take a re-examination of British culture as they're rebuilding London
If you
and
think about it,
they look back and they realize no one's done a cleaned up republishing of Charles Dickens since the 1870s.
you want to know something too? There would have been people alive at that time who would have remembered Christmas the way Charles Dickens would have wrote
Christmas
about it.
wasn't the same as when I was a kid in the
So
1870s.
there would be people who would actually be able to like relive like the aesthetic that the media eventually comes up with, but they'd be basing it off those memories.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and keep in mind, prior to this renaissance, people were already making black and white movies of A Christmas Carol. I believe the one that you see on TV almost every year is an MGM from 1932 that is like the quintessential version that gets played everywhere.
I'm telling you, Muppets, better, the best version.
They're the Muppets, man. They get
I
their
f-
own category away from everything else.
God, I feel like every there needs to be a Muppets version of every single type of genre movie.
The Game Awards proved that if you let the Muppets into things, those two old men will follow you everywhere and heckle you no matter what you do.
Mm.
I just want them in the
That
background of every horror game.
listen, that one Asian game developer was ready to get up out of the stands and fight them.
It's great. I fucking
But
But
I'm
yeah,
telling you.
yeah, Dickens gets some very high honors as a result of this reinterest in his work and these republishings. The revival sees his books become the versions we have today. They get back into the school curriculum everywhere. And he receives, on the centennial of death in 1970, the title of second best British author
It was the
in all of
first.
history.
Shakespeare,
First place,
obviously.
yep. William Shakespeare, the bard himself, is basically, you cannot dethrone him.
Yeah, you
It's
can't.
like saying, I'm a better rock star than Elvis. It doesn't
I
matter
think
if you
there are
are,
otherwise.
you can't say that.
Yeah.
Shame.
Listen.
I
I
mean, to
think
be
that
the
we
second best British author, that's a pretty good honor, especially with how much Shakespeare is acclaimed.
I guess
Yep. Yep.
still
But I actually think we're probably at a good point here to wrap up on today's episode, unless you guys have any
on
final thoughts.
go, comrade Charles.
Oh, what the Dickens. Let's get out of here before Waldorf and whatever the other one's name is show up from all of Aaron's comments.
Listen, now we could just redo the Christmas story with a lot of very rich people.
Elmo is
I called
the
dibs on Christmas future.
Elmo is the capitalistic overlord that takes Scrooge's spot. Elmo needs to learn not to abuse his workers. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you in the new year.